Hi everyone, welcome to Frustrated Book Purists. Frustrated Book Purists is a series where we look at movie and TV adaptations of books and discuss the changes that were made. Episodes are not meant to be comprehensive, they are more of a starting point which viewers are welcome to add on and discuss with each other and with us. As a reminder, these are just our personal opinions. They are not the official opinions of the Rehoboth Beach Public Library. And from here on out, there will be
spoilers.
You have been warned. Proceed.
We're your Frustrated Book Purists. I'm Sarah.
I'm Lauren.
And we're double teaming this month's episode for the very first time.
Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows is a favorite of mine. I read it over the course of a week one summer while I was on vacation, and I just could not put it down. It was the first time that happened since the Hunger Games, so yeah.
And although it had been on my to-be-read list, we know how those go. And Lauren, in her infinite wisdom of Six of Crows, was like, kept on me. You've got to read this. You've got to read this. You've got to read this. Yes, Kaz, I read it. And now we're both kind of huge Grishaverse fans.
Yep.
Although our lovely crows are our favorites.
They are. They always will be.
So, with a little bit of information about Leigh Bardugo, she is an Israeli-born and Los Angeles-raised author who now, thanks to Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows, is a New York Times best author. Shadow and Bone, first published in 2012, is the first novel of the Grishaverse. It is her first novel, and there are three primary works in that series, which is accompanied by the duologies Six of Crows and the new King of Scars duologies.
So, Shadow and Bone is the story of Alina Starkov, who is your average run-of-the-mill teenager. She's, except that she's an orphan. And she and her best friend / secret crush Mal leave their orphanage as they get older and enlist with the Second Army because Ravka has been at war for, I think, about 100 years.
It's been a long time.
Yes. And so while they are making a dangerous crossing over the Shadowfold, they are attacked by Volcra, and Mal is badly injured, but in the process, Alina awakens a dormant power that she didn't know that she had. So one thing leads to another. She gets sent to the little palace to train with her fellow Grisha to expand her power and hopefully destroy the Shadowfold.
Yay, Alina!
Yay! Oh, you don't like Alina, do you?
Not especially much. More on that later. Bardugo has written a richly developed world based on Russian, Norwegian, Chinese, and Mongolian mythology and culture. Ravka, where Shadow and Bone primarily takes place, sits in the center of the continent, thank you, Lauren, with Firda and Shuhan to the north and south. The area was primarily divided and ruled by several feudal provinces. I can talk. Feudal provinces before being unified under Yaramir the Determined. This was the time of the border wars. This is also a time when the priest guard, apparatus, and amplifiers, more on that later, were created.
Now, Shadow and Bone, as far as like Ravka's history is concerned, is primarily about the creation of the Shadowfold and the Darkling and the Grisha. Shadowfold was created by the Black Heretic. who turns out to be the Darkling, or Alexander. He goes by a lot of names.
Creepy old man.
Doesn't make him any less creepy. Initially, he was trying to protect the Grisha from the king who feared his power, and it went not great. It went very badly wrong.
Grisha, or users of the small science, use the principle that like calls to like. And most Grisha see their powers as an extension of the natural world, not as magic, although there is magic in the Grishaverse as well. They see it as a way to manipulate matter at the most basic form. The name is derived from Saint Gregory, who trained the first Korporaki in Ravka. Materialki are the order of fabricators, or those who work with metal, glass, textiles, and chemicals. Etherealki, I am butchering these names. So etherealki, or the order of summoners, use powers that are connected to the natural world. Fire, shadow, sunlight, wind, water. They're kind of like the avatars.
Yeah.
The corporal key, or the order of the living and dead, are those who focus on the human body. It can be good for good or death. Anyways, the Darkling and Alina, as Grisha, that can summon shadows and sunlight, are technically ethereal key. However, as we find out through the book, they are in a division all of their own because their powers are so one of a kind or rare.
All right, so let's talk about these characters and differences between the book and the show. The main character is Alina Starkov, who travels from her orphanage to enlist in the Second Army, and then is discovered as the chosen one, so to speak, who has the power of the Sun Summoner, and gets sent to the Little Palace to start her training.
Oh my. So for me, Alina in the book took me quite a long time to kind of warm up to. She was very whiny and obnoxious, unimaginative, and a bit kind of just inane. She's just there, wallowing in the fact that she's normal, heaven forbid. Even after she spends several months at the Little Palace, completely ensconced in, luxury and anything that she could ever want. She's all, I miss Mal. Why hasn't Mal answered my letters? I don't have any friends. Everyone hates me. I can't control my powers. Blah, blah, blah. However, Alina goes through quite a bit of development much later on in the book. And Alina grows in confidence and becomes self-reliant and quite determined, actually. And even though she is forced into this growth and forced because of her experiences, and she learns from other perspectives and starts to understand and see the truth about what is around her, that growth becomes her own. And that's what I really, towards the end of the book, I really liked about her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I went into Shadow and Bone having already finished the Six of Crows duology, and I knew that the trilogy was Leigh Bardugo's first books, and that the Six of Crows books were widely considered to be better and more improved. So I went into this with the understanding that, okay, this is more of a typical YA fantasy trilogy, and that Alina is more of a stereotypical YA heroine, so I gave her a little more leniency as I was reading.
No leniency from me. I had read Six of Crows. Lauren had sung the wonderfulness of Shadow and Bone because she read it just before I did. And I was not prepared for her mundaneness.
Yeah, I mean, I could honestly do without the YA female protagonist who spends a lot of time complaining about how plain she is and how ordinary she is and how clearly no one loves me. Which, not to say that those aren't real problems facing women, especially young women, like having a warped sense of self-esteem is definitely an issue that a lot of women face, because we're constantly assaulted with like all these ideas of how we should be.
You're never enough.
Yes. So, but I think the problem is they all kind of tend to sound the same, and it's not like, I don't always see it explored in different ways. Like every young woman is different, and if they're struggling with self-esteem issues, they're not going to handle it in exactly the same way. But a lot of these YA female protagonists, it feels like I'm reading the same thing with a different coat of paint on it.
And I think particularly with fantasy YA heroines, it's all of a sudden that's all cleared up when they gain a dormant power or just become aware that they're magical or they have a special power in some way. And I want a normal heroine with normal problems that solves them in a normalish way. It's not because of something that happens to them.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, those were general thoughts on Alina, I think. And I want to add that as the story goes on, like Sarah was saying, there's more nuance to her. She grows, she changes. Even like the love triangle, so to speak, I feel like there's, which we will get to that.
Let's put a pin in that thought.
I just want to say, like, there's more to it than just, oh, what guy do I pick? Like, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And
get to that more later.
I will just say as a warning, if you are a Darkling Alina shipper, you might not want to watch the rest of this because we're not fans. And that's nothing against you.
We are old, possibly older, and I'm not going to say wiser.
Yeah. No.
But we have higher expectations.
Yeah. we have different
viewpoints and perspectives
on shipping. So
yeah. But anyways, Malyan Oretsev, or Mal, is Alina's best friend who she follows into the Second Army. They grew up together at the orphanage, and he is an excellent hunter and tracker. He is a terrible flirt and seems almost to flaunt his escapades. Does that seem
in the book?
fair?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, in front of Alina, and it is unclear in both book and show how Mal feels towards Alina at first, or if he's just obtuse about her own feelings.
The show does, I think, handle Mal's character better than the book. For one thing, we actually get to see what he was doing while Alina was training at the Little Palace, and we see how both of them were trying to write letters to each other, which somehow they just weren't getting. I wonder who could have been stopping that.
Let us stop and think. I think that's an excellent segue, though, into our next character.
Oh, boy.
The Darkling.
Oh,
there is nothing likable or redeemable about the Darkling as a character. Can you think of something?
Well, I will say I've only read the first book, and I've read parts.
Me too.
I've read about halfway through the second book, so I know the show kind of touches in on his tragic backstory and everything. So sure, there's stuff we don't know yet, but as it stands in the book, the first book and season 1,
which is primarily what we are covering in this video. Like, we aren't trying, if we do more videos on the second book and further seasons, those things that come to light will be part of that video.
Mm-hmm. We love to hate him.
We do. He the only thing that I like about him is that he makes an excellent villain.
Oh, he is, absolutely.
Leigh Bardugo has written such a wonderfully atrocious, irredeemable, love to love.
Love to love.
Love to hate?
Yeah.
But I really don't love to hate him. I want to hate him. Villain. So that's why I said love to love. Like, I love to hate this villain. Because he is so awful. He's a creepy old man. But we'll talk more about this, though, when we speak of the Darklina pairing.
It's revealed in the book that, they talk about the Black Heretic who created the Shadowfold, and the Darkling is the descendant of the Black Heretic, and for many years, these Darklings have had to bear the shame of their ancestor creating the Shadowfold. So sad. No, actually, he is the Black Heretic. He has basically been faking his death for hundreds of years.
Centuries upon centuries.
Reintroducing himself as his descendant. One of the issues that I had with the show was how it conveys the whole revelation about who the Darkling really is and what his plans are, particularly for Alina. Because what happens in the book is they're at this, there's this grand ball going on at the palace where they're going to introduce Alina, have her do some pretty light shows and stuff like that. It's a whole big celebration, and afterwards, Bagra, who has been Alina's teacher, showing her how to use her powers, suddenly shows up in Alina's room, takes her through a secret passageway, and starts explaining to her, I need to get you out of the palace. And Alina's like, what? Why? And she starts explaining, listen, the Darkling doesn't want you to destroy the Shadowfold. That's what everyone thinks she's being trained to do. She's like, no, he wants to expand the Shadowfold, and he wants to use your power to basically keep things in check, make sure that he doesn't get killed by Volker when he goes in there. Because even he's not really immune to that. He's also been looking for an amplifier to expand her powers and his powers, and explaining that once he finds it, and he's getting very close to finding it, he's basically he's been telling her, oh, I'm going to use this amplifier to make you more powerful. And she's like, cool. And Bagra's like, no, he's going to use that to enslave you. And
I think that's much clearer in the book.
It is much clearer in the book. And you know why it's much clearer in the book? Because Bagra explains all of that in one chapter as they're going along their way through the secret passage.
And you might have said, well, that's how it's done in the show. No,
it's not. She starts to explain certain things. She says, he is the Black Heretic. I'm his mother, actually. You can't trust him. But she doesn't explain what the amplifier is supposed to do. And so, there's a scene later on in a future episode where Mal and Alina are on the run, and they've decided to go after the stag whose antlers are supposed to create her amplifier. And Mal's like, why does the Darkling want the stag? And Alina's like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? That's kind of important. Did you not think that maybe that was something you should convey to her? And Like, last episode, they're going into the fold like they do in the book, and Alina's like, why aren't you letting me destroy it? I'm like, you knew why in the book. You knew why he wasn't destroying it, because it was all spelled out. Like,
yeah, and like, this is where the series, the adaptation, takes a big turn from the book. Like, there's not that background information that is shared in like that growing anticipatory way of the book. Like in the book, Alina is shown a book that makes no, like
in the book,
the apparat shows Alina a tome, like an ancient book that explains amplifiers and explains it to
that was
her.
In the show too. I think the Darkling explains it to her in the book, but he doesn't explain it like
in a decent way.
No.
That, you know, she might start to realize this is what I'm trying to do. No, he's only giving her certain information at certain times, completely manipulating her, but more on that later.
Oh, we're gonna get to that later.
So all of these things are just,
and if I had to guess,
left
like,
open.
if I had to guess, they probably wanted to like peter out information about who the Darkling is and what his plans are in the show because they wanted to create suspense. That's the only thing I can really think of.
Yeah.
But I think they did a disservice. Like, when you're dealing with exposition, you want it to be as clear and concise and getting it out of the way as soon as possible. Like, all this, like, dragging it out, like, we'll explain a little bit in one episode, then we'll explain a little bit in another episode, and then we'll explain a little, like...
It does like when you have a book and you're doing it that way, it adds intrigue and mystery and anticipation. In a show, it's really hard to do that in that manner.
It just makes it needlessly complex.
Yeah.
Just the suspense can be, are they going to find the amplifier before the Darkling does and takes over everything? Because that's kind of how it was in the book. I found it very suspenseful.
Yeah.
The suspense can be, oh my gosh, they're going into the fold. Like, what's he gonna do now that he's controlling Alina? How are the crows gonna get out of this? Which is, in fact, what I was thinking the whole time. It doesn't have to be like, why isn't the Darklings destroying the Shadow Fold yet?
Yeah. And so to kind of take a turn from that, before we go on to Darklina and that pairing, we need to talk about how in the book, Alina asks the Darkling to be merciful to Mal, I think.
Yes, and that wasn't in the show.
No. And he says he'll be merciful by giving them a chance to say their goodbyes over the course of a night and then executing Mal the next day in the fold. And this is at the very end. But in the show, the Darkling doesn't do this. Which is fine because it gives Mal a chance to sneak aboard the skiff and team up with the crows. More on them.
The crows make everything better.
They do. But it does take away a moment that's pretty dark for a YA heroine. Alina ends up saving Mal and using her power to take them the rest of the way across the fold while leaving everyone aboard the skiff to die.
Yeah.
Like, that leaves a lot of blood on Alina's hands that she is traumatized by. And that is where I see a lot of her growth.
And I can say from what I've read of the second book, it sticks with her. That,
yeah. And that is a good thing.
Yes.
As it should. So this experience for both Mal and Alina and their relationship and their kind of newfound feelings for each other, or at least told feelings to each other, helps them grow, helps each of them grow, and helps them grow together and get through that experience and pushes on through the next part of the series.
It also takes away from the Darkling a little. Like, it was a horrible thing for him to do to Alina, and they just erased that. I guess to make him more likable, to make that ship more likable.
No. The ship that should burn.
And again, if you like it, this is not an attack on you. We just don't care for it.
No. Alina and the Darkling. Where do we start? I think first, it is important to state, particularly for young readers, this is not a good relationship model.
Nope.
Not at all. If you want your own Darkling, or if you find your own Darkling,
get out.
Get out.
Run.
Flee as fast as you can.
Find a trusted adult and get out of that relationship.
Yeah. The Darkling is purposefully manipulating and using Alina for his own gain. The toxicity that leaks from their interactions is painful and embarrassing to the reader or viewer. Like, I cringed so much. Like, I was just like, oh no, Alina, don't.
And yeah, and to Leigh Bardugo's credit, it's supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to be a healthy relationship.
And credit to her for writing it so beautifully and purposefully writing it in this manner.
I've said to Sarah many times as she was reading through this, I'm like, this is Edward and Bella if the author was self-aware.
Yes. And she's writing it over the top on purpose. And she does it so beautifully. I cannot say that enough. Because we need a good it is a good toxic relationship role model. Like pointing these things out to young readers.
It's a good example of what not to do.
Exactly. And Bardugo wants the reader to understand, I think, that Alina is extremely young and inexperienced. Bardugo wants the reader to discover the Darkling's toxicity, his manipulation, his true character slowly, and come to that realization on their own, developing their own conclusions. And writing the Darkling the way that she has, his betrayal of Alina later on truly is horrifying to Alina.
It hurts.
And the reader, it's a deep knife to the back, I guess, and to the heart, metaphorically. And just how far he has gone in his life, how corrupt he truly is, and how he's preying on this young girl is absolutely disgusting.
There's a moment, like, in the aforementioned scene where Bagra is trying to get Alina out of the palace, where Alina's like, wait, I can't leave right now. And Bagra's like, why not? He's like, well, the Darkling said he was going to come to my room tonight, and he's going to notice I'm not there. And Bagra just kind of goes like, oh, honey.
Oh, I forgot about that scene.
Yeah, it's just like, she flat out says, he's had centuries to practice, like, lying to young women. Like,
he has done it over and over and over again. You are just one of many.
Which is crushing for her to hear.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah. And no girl should have to go through that kind of manipulation and everything. But I think it's so important for her character too. Because that's really when you start to see the change in Alina.
And like, older readers might be going through this thinking, oh, this is kind of creepy, isn't it? And so then the twist hits, yeah, it is creepy. Yeah. You shouldn't like this.
Yeah, and I can't tell you, like, Lauren finished the book and I started it. Like, there was just like a week or two between that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this guy, like, so skeezy.
She kept texting me, I'm just like, keep going, keep going, keep going.
I'm really hating this girl, and I'm disliking this girl, and I'm hating this man.
Keep going.
And Lauren's like, keep going, keep going. And I'm like, I'm 3/4 of the way through the book. How can I keep going?
She was in the staff room, like, at lunch. I was just like, are you there yet? Are you there yet?
Like, reading this part at lunch, I was like, oh no. Oh yes! Go, Alina, go! Yay, Bagra! I think Bagra is my favorite.
Bagra
character
is truly the unsung hero. So in terms of book versus show, I wanted to talk about Darkling and Alina because I remember seeing articles coming out, like, as the show was first coming out on Netflix, all about how they were making changes to make the ship less, quote-unquote, problematic. And I remember looking at that, and I hadn't seen the show yet, and just thinking, I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't see how you're going to do that. And having watched the show, yeah, no. There is no way, in my humble opinion, to make Darkling and Alina a less problematic ship without fundamentally changing certain starting with their age.
Yeah, you have to fundamentally change their characters to make it less problematic. And I think it's great that Ben Barnes, as the actor, is aware of the toxicity and the problems his character arises. And he plays into that so well because he plays the Darkling magnificently. Yes. I have no problem with Ben Barnes.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a Hollywood Reporter interview, put it in the description, where they interviewed him, and he talks about, like, the changes that they made and why they changed it, but also says, at the end of the day, it's still an abusive, relationship. It's still, it's not a good relationship.
He's still manipulating her. He's still, like, centuries older than her.
Yeah.
Using her.
There was talk like, oh, well, sometimes Alina initiates the kissing instead of it being all him. And no, he is an adult. A centuries-old adult, as you said. She is a teenage girl. It doesn't matter if she initiated it. It's still bad.
And, like, at a couple points, and I think it happens in the show as well as the book, like, she's like, when she first meets him, she's like, oh, he's only a few years older than me because he appears that way. Well, when you're a Grisha, you have a longer life anyway. So when she's learning that, she's like, okay, so he's appears to be my age, but he's like, what is it, 125, he tells her? And that's not, like, even the fact that she will have a longer life as a Grisha doesn't make that okay.
No. And that would be bad on its own if it weren't for the fact that, like, he still, as we've said before, he manipulates her constantly.
And I think that comes, like, that's my major problem. His manipulation of Alina. Like, he thinks enslaving her to this antlers and using her power to extend his own power is okay.
He knows what he's doing to her. It is a conscious choice on his part, and he just I think he does care about her kind of in his own twisted way, but he just constantly justifies in his head what he's doing to her. It's all for this, like, greater good. He believes what he's doing is right, and using her the way he is, that's just gotta be done.
Yep.
As opposed to Kaz and Inej, which we can talk about that.
We'll talk about that. We keep saying we'll talk about the crows later. Maybe we should... No, we'll talk about that later. So...
Suffice it to say, I don't like it when people compare, like, the Darkling and Alina to Kaz and Inej, because there is no comparison.
There is no comparison. Inej and Kaz are leagues above Alina and the Darkling. completely agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Particularly after reading Six of Crows.
Wow, that was a lot.
That was a lot of information. And we still haven't gotten to the crows. That this is going to have a part 2.
Yeah.
Where we only talk about the crows.
The thesis being the crows make everything better just by existing.
I mean, yeah. We kind of have this thing with crows. It's just not Six of Crows either. You'll learn that later on, as we are also doing a anime manga episode later on also. Haven't figured out the order of all of these yet. You might be surprised in the next couple of months. But we also have a theme of crows. So, stay tuned, first of all, for part 2, where we talk about the crows!
The crows!
And look at the description below for links to Zirin J. Zhao's episode.
Zirin J. Zhao's episode on Shadow and Bone.
And their failure to
deal with racism in a sensitive and even accurate way.
And the article for the Hollywood Reporter from Ben Barnes, and maybe some other awesome links as well. And stay tuned for next month, where you're gonna get crows one way or another. We don't know which crows it'll be. So keep reading and keep watching and be frustrated with us, please. I hope we're not the only frustrated ones out here. The end.
Bye.